Does excess protein fuel cancer? My opinion, my data-based perspective response to that question is no. The sources of the protein that you're ingesting does matter, though. The general consumption of processed meats and certain types of cancer. Mechanistically, I think we need more research to say for sure what degree of processing, what types of processing, if any, are actually causally related to an increased risk of carcinogenesis. Microwaves, good or bad? Good. Just don't microwave metal. I actually don't have one in my house, and you also don't really want to microwave food in plastic. That's been shown to enhance the migration of plastic chemicals into your food. So like the grease-proof wrappers sometimes that wrap sandwiches and burgers and things like that. Eating your body weight in grams of protein daily. The recommendation for general good health without specific body composition goals is 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Notably, that is 50% over the recommended daily allowance for protein. Creatine with coffee, for women specifically, yay or nay? Been told the benefits are negated with coffee. The benefits of creatine are not negated with coffee. You could take it with coffee, although I can't imagine doing that because creatine is like eating sand. Why ruin a good cup of coffee by putting creatine? All right, AMA number 3, what's going on, everybody? It's a holiday week, big week. Thank you guys for being here regardless. I know you're busy eating yummy holiday food and spending time with loved ones. And I'm, as you listen to this, I should be, if everything goes according to plan, in Las Vegas with my family, hanging out with my 2 monstrous nieces and my brother and his partner, his lady. I don't like the term partner. His lady friend, his girlfriend, his long-term girlfriend, baby mama, and yeah, just so much love and peace and happiness and health to you all. We're gonna go through these questions. You guys, per usual, sent in some amazing questions, which whenever we do these, like one of the best, most gratifying aspects of doing this is that I get to see the depth and nuance with which you guys think, which is so incredible. It just makes me feel so good about the community that we're building here on the podcast and in the YouTube and on Instagram, across all the different channels. So let's get into it. And as a reminder, gentle reminder, I'm not a medical doctor. None of this should be construed as medical advice. Many of my responses are going to be essentially hot takes, with, of course, the background of knowledge that I have on these topics. But yeah, they're going to be pretty off the cuff. So if I get anything wrong, don't email me or email me. You're always welcome to email me or leave a comment in the comments. All right, let's start. So Martha Eelman asks, thoughts on eating your body weight in protein daily? Well, that sounds like an awful idea, to eat your entire body weight in protein daily. I mean, I'm like 180 pounds. I'd have to eat 180 pounds of protein daily. That sounds nutty. But I think what the question that I'm being a bit glib. What I think what you're really asking is eating your body weight in grams of protein daily. That is not a terrible idea, but with some important caveats. So the recommendation for general good health without specific body composition goals is 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Notably, that is 50% over the recommended daily allowance for protein. So the RDA for protein is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. And that is insufficient. That is basically to keep your body alive, to keep you from falling apart. But it's insufficient for good health, according to research over the past couple of decades. That number hasn't been updated in 40 years, to my knowledge. Now, when it comes to optimizing body composition, to protecting and preserving your muscle as well as growing your muscle, which is crucially important, you want to generally target a range, and different research groups have arrived at different conclusions here, but you want to target a range of 1.6 grams to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So 1.6 grams per kilogram to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. Now, we use kilograms in research often to make to put that in more familiar terms, it's roughly 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Now, where it gets a little bit more complicated is that the real recommendation is you're meant to target your lean body weight, the amount of lean mass, because we're trying to protect with our protein intake our lean mass. We're not trying to protect our fat tissue, and we don't need to eat protein to preserve our fat tissue. Fat tissue is preserved by calorie excess or energy balance. And so if you are very overweight, you can generally use your target body weight as a rough approximation of what your lean mass is. So for me, I'm pretty lean right now. I'm 180 pounds. So that target window is speaking to me. But if I had 40 pounds to lose, I would use my goal weight to approximate my where that range lies for me. Now, where on that range should you attempt to target, right? Again, 0.7 to 1 gram of lean mass. Well, you might want to prioritize the higher end of that range if you are, on a cut and you're trying to preserve your lean mass. You might want to target the lower end of that range if you are trying to gain weight, because protein is so satiating. So eating less protein might actually make more room in your appetite for consuming calories from other food sources. So it really totally depends. It's not like a hard and fast rule. So as a general minimum, my recommendation is actually not to target your body weight in grams of protein per day. It's to target 1.6 grams per kilogram or 0.7 grams per pound of lean mass every day. That's the minimum. So I try personally to hit that threshold. And if I go above it, it's all good. I just try not to go below that threshold, which again, for me is 0.7 grams of protein times my body weight. And that is a great target to hit really no matter what your weight is. If you're very overweight, you can use your your target weight. You don't need to eat as much protein if you're very overweight. But on the other hand, eating a lot of protein, actually hitting that target and even going higher in some cases can be good, not necessarily because it's required for muscle protein synthesis, but because protein is so satiating. So if you're having difficulty with your appetite, managing your appetite, and you feel hungry all the time, targeting higher protein levels can actually be really useful. So there's no downside to going higher than 1.6 grams or 0.7 grams per pound of body weight, but there is a point of diminishing returns. So eating above 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight really isn't going to do all that much for you, and it gets pricey to eat that much protein. So I know that was a lot. I hope it makes sense. Protein is something that your intake really needs to be tailored to who you are, your preferences, your body composition, your goals. But that is the general range that seems to be the consensus now among experts in body composition. 1.6 grams to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, or 0.7 grams to 1 gram per pound of ideal weight. That was a fun question. And yeah, I love, the backbone of my diet is protein. And I know there's a lot of hype now with regards to protein, and wherever there's hype, there's generally, you'll find pushback. And I think it's a nice way of, having a type of checks and balances within the online discourse, the nutrition discourse. But protein, the word originates from Greek, and it means of first importance. So, it really, protein is not a fad. Ancient physicians recognized the importance of protein, and modern research has only supported that stance, that position. So, yeah, protein's wonderful. It is definitely worth prioritizing, not at the expense of other nutrients, because otherwise you could thrive, off a diet of skinless, boneless chicken breast. Spoiler alert, you can't. You want to prioritize fiber, phytonutrients, whole plants, fruits, and things like that, but protein is great. All right, Brittany5920 asked, microwaves, good or bad? Good. Just don't microwave metal. But beyond that, I think microwaves are totally fine. I actually don't have one in my house, so I guess full disclosure there. I don't often microwave stuff, and you also don't really want to microwave food in plastic. That's been shown to enhance the migration of plastic chemicals into your food. So like the grease-proof wrappers sometimes that wrap sandwiches and burgers and things like that. You just want to be careful what it is that you're microwaving. But when it comes to just microwaving food on a plate, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. So yeah, microwave's got a thumbs up from me. Very fast, convenient way to reheat food. Kelly A. Scott, 08. Non-GMO organic soy, yay or nay? Yay. I am a fan of soy. It is not my primary protein intake source. It's not my primary source of protein, but I'm certainly not afraid of soy, and there are some soy products that I really enjoy. I enjoy tamari sauce on my sushi. I enjoy natto, which is a fermented Japanese soy dish that is a rich source of nattokinase and vitamin K2 and spermidine, which is, these are all compounds that are being looked at now in the context of longevity. So natto, which is a soy-based dish, is incredibly healthy. I actually think that natto, I sometimes think that natto should have more of a presence in my diet based on what's in it. It's a fantastic food. There's a learning curve in terms of, it can be an acquired taste. It's kind of a weird food. I actually enjoy natto with a little bit of tamari sauce on it. It's fantastic. And then edamame. Like edamame is amazing. It's a great source of dietary fiber. It's a great source of protein. And soy protein is actually among the plant proteins. Legumes in general tend to be very high in leucine, which make it a uniquely high quality protein source among plant-based sources of protein. So soy is a staple for vegan bodybuilders, vegetarian bodybuilders. So again, it's not my primary protein source. There are better options. There are more nutrient-dense options. If you are not meat avoidant, I think red meat's fantastic. Eggs are fantastic. Poultry's fantastic. Dairy is fantastic. But as a sort of adjunct, I think soy is amazing. I don't understand the polarity with regards to soy intake. It's just like there's this weird assumption that soy is like gonna feminize you. It's gonna make men grow breasts. I just don't. The research doesn't support that. I enjoy soy on occasion, and I do think that if you are gonna eat soy regularly, I do think that there is merit to prioritizing organic. It's one of these commodity crops here in the United States that tends to be heavily sprayed. So I definitely think there's merit to going the organic option. But when I'm in a restaurant, a Japanese restaurant, and edamame is on the menu and I order it, like 9 times out of 10, I'm assuming it's not organic. So we can't let perfect be the enemy of the good. But all that to say, don't be afraid of it. We got another question about soy, which I kind of touched on in the prior question. Cassie Sadowski asked, is soy for men healthy or should it be avoided? Yeah, there have been a number of studies now looking at whether or not soy has feminizing effects in men, whether the very weakly estrogenic compounds that are in soy, like the phytoestrogens, the phytoestrogenic isoflavones that are present naturally in soy, should be avoided. And I think that if soy is making up a small portion of your diet, I do not think that there's anything to be worried about. At higher levels, I don't believe there to be any sort of risk. I know that when protein levels are high and leucine is equated, people who are on vegan or vegetarian diets can build just as much muscle. I just don't know how real of a risk soy-induced feminizing traits are. I just don't think that that's a real problem that needs to be worried about. But I think obviously online, there's a lot of polarity. You know, the conversations always tend to be dominated by this this or that mindset, but it can be this and that. And, you know, the bulk of my diet is animal source protein, but again, I have no qualms about eating a little bit of soy here and there. In fact, I think it's a bonus. Like tamari, I use tamari on my sushi. I'm getting a little bit of extra protein. That edamame appetizer, it's a great source of dietary fiber. It's low in fat, it's high in protein. It's all good. So yeah, soy is definitely not something to freak out about. And the estrogens in soy, they're phytoestrogens. They're not estrogens. They're phytoestrogens, which don't have as pronounced of an effect, I think, in normal everyday doses, as is often made out to be the case. So do not worry about it. Dolly RDH asks, difference in creatine monohydrate or HCL, one better than the other? Well, one is certainly better at making your wallet feel lighter, and that is creatine HCL. It tends to be a lot more expensive than creatine monohydrate. And though I don't know that we have evidence to say that it performs worse than creatine monohydrate, we also don't have evidence to say that it performs better than creatine monohydrate. And creatine monohydrate has under its belt decades of research with regards to physical performance, body composition, safety, importantly. And so some do believe, and I'm not as well versed in the literature on this, but I know that some believe that creatine HCL is a bit more tolerated. It's believed to be less likely to bloat you. But creatine monohydrate does not bloat you. That's a misconception, I think, about creatine monohydrate that many harbor. And I did my high school senior thesis on creatine more than 20 years ago, almost 30 years ago, 25 years ago at this point. And so I've been thinking about supplementing with, talking about, reading about creatine for a very long time. And creatine draws water into your muscles. So it's not drawing it under the skin. It's not putting it around your face. It's literally in your muscles. So it's helping to give your body shape, and it boosts performance. And unless you're in a loading phase of creatine, which some do when they're initiating a creatine supplementation with creatine, they tend to take very high doses, like 25 grams a day of creatine. That's the typical loading phase that's often discussed in the context of creatine. A daily dose of 3 to 5 grams of creatine a day is not going to bloat you. So I really wouldn't worry about it. There's so much evidence, and creatine monohydrate is so cheap at this point. I mean, there are so many reputable supplement manufacturers that have great creatine offerings. I mean, we work with Puri. They make a wonderful creatine that has taurine in it. Taurine is an amino acid. There's lots of research on taurine and its impact on metabolic health. It seems to be really healthful, and it's not an amino acid that we ingest all that frequently today. So they actually have a product where they combine both. Kion makes a wonderful creatine. Momentous makes a wonderful creatine. It's easy to find high quality creatine monohydrate, and it's very inexpensive. So I would not spend my money at this juncture until the research bears out some magical benefit of creatine HCL that you're not getting from creatine monohydrate. I would not spend my money on creatine HCL, despite whatever marketing you see on Instagram. I wouldn't go there. If you've got money to burn and you want to try it, why not? It's all good. I take creatine for what it's worth. I take creatine every day. I take 5 grams a day. And I usually will bump that up a little bit when I'm feeling stressed or underslept. The dose in some of these studies, like the sleep deprivation studies where they see an improvement in cognitive function with creatine, is they usually will give very high doses. We don't yet have sufficient research to say whether or not lower doses will have the same impact with regards to brain health and cognitive function. But those are the doses that are being studied at this point, the very high doses. Research will usually pick a high dose to start with and then try to figure out what the minimal effective dose is after that, after an effect is found. So we don't yet know if lower doses does the same thing, but I generally will take 5 grams on most days, and I'll bump that up to 10, 15, maybe even 20 grams if I'm jet lagged, if I'm underslept, for the cognitive benefits. But muscle saturation occurs at a much lower dose. So 5 grams a day, 3 to 5 grams a day is generally the level that you want to hit to fully saturate your muscles so that you get that performance boost. And even that dose is likely the optimal dose to saturate your muscles is going to vary person to person. Women who have less muscle mass might be able to get away with lower doses, which is where the 3 gram a day recommendation comes from. Men with much more muscle mass might do better actually with higher levels. So, bodybuilders might be regularly taking, 5 grams a day, maybe even more, because they've got so much muscle. And you want to saturate. Creatine works when your muscles are saturated with it, because it boosts basically ATP synthesis, essentially in your muscles. People who eat lots and lots of red meat might see less of a benefit from high dose creatine because they're already getting so much creatine from the red meat in their diets, because red meat is a natural source of creatine. So, there really is no truly one-size-fits-all recommendation, but the general safe and effective range for creatine is 3 to 5 grams a day. So, and you want to take it every day. Timing doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you take it at night, doesn't matter if you take it in the morning, doesn't matter if you take it pre-workout, doesn't really matter if you take it post-workout. There is some thinking that the post-workout window enhances creatine absorption into your muscles, because after a workout, your muscles are basically like a sponge for nutrients. But it really doesn't, we're splitting hairs. You just want to make sure that you're taking it consistently. That is the name of the game when it comes to creatine. We had another question about creatine. I don't know where it went, but somebody asked about creatine with coffee. Let me see if I can pull that up, because that is something that I've seen on social media. So I'm going to pull up the question so that I can credit the person who asked it accordingly. So faith.hunt on Insta asked, creatine with coffee for women specifically, yay or nay? Been told the benefits are negated with coffee. The benefits of creatine are not negated with coffee. You could take it with coffee, although I can't imagine doing that because creatine is it's like eating sand. So why ruin a good cup of coffee by putting creatine in it? But if you take it separately, the question I guess remains is, does consuming coffee within close proximity to taking creatine, does that blunt the effects of creatine? The answer is no. There were some early studies that suggested that maybe the performance impact was, attenuated to some degree, but coffee does not block the saturation, and it certainly doesn't desaturate your muscles of creatine. It takes time to saturate your muscles with creatine. It doesn't happen overnight. That's why, as I alluded to earlier, many will recommend, you'll see sometimes even on supplement labels, a loading phase of creatine, because it takes either a high dose or an extended period of time, about 28 days of a lower dose, to saturate your muscles with creatine. And so it also takes quite some time to desaturate your muscles of creatine. So drinking coffee with your creatine is not going to have any measurable impact on the creatine that's in your muscles doing its thing. Is it, maybe there's a small effect, but overall, I think, again, splitting hairs, I would not worry about it. If that is your current routine and that's what makes sense for you, to take creatine in the morning with your morning cup of coffee, don't stop. I think that totally makes sense. Not a concern for me at all. Katie Kaboom asks, thoughts on intermittent fasting. So I guess I've kind of like I don't know. I've changed my mind, I guess, a little bit on intermittent fasting. I mean, in general, I think intermittent fasting, it's not good or bad. If it works for you as a means of calorie restraint, I think it's great. Stick to it. I'm not going to bash it. I also don't think that there's really much of a necessity for it. I think one of the problems today, one of the reasons why so many people struggle with their weight, why 1 in 2 people are almost obese, about 42% of the US population is obese, and that number is trending up. If you include people who are overweight, about 3/4 of the US population is either overweight or obese. I think one of the major drivers of that is our constant proximity to hyperpalatable, ultra-processed foods that are quick to eat, easy to digest, dilute of protein, loaded with added sugars and unhealthy oils and refined grains and the like. And those foods are just generally around all the freaking time. So you got to have some form of restraint in place today. And the goal for you is not to try to find the best diet, but the diet that is going to feel, or the way of eating that's going to feel the least restrictive to you. And if for you that means imposing some sort of temporal restraint, then I think that that's great. You know, there is data looking at people who intermittent fast, who practice time-restricted eating, and it's hard to parse the benefits that are seen in those clinical trials from the mere act of adjusting the timing of your food intake, from the fact that oftentimes putting those temporal guardrails in place leads to reduced energy intake. And if intermittent fasting leads to, for you, reduced energy intake, reduced calorie intake, well, then that's a great thing. And I think that's one of the key mechanisms actually by which early time restricted eating or even intermittent fasting works for so many people. Because say you put a guardrail in place, like I'm not going to eat past 8 p.m. Well, that's very reasonable, not eating past dinner, because what do most people tend to eat after dinner? Well, after dinner, you know, nobody's eating more lean chicken breast or lean steak after dinner, right? Like 99% of what is consumed after dinner is likely ice cream and bagged or packaged products, right? Like chips or cookies or confectionery products, cakes, things like that. So by putting in that guardrail of not eating after dinner, I think that that's going to be really helpful for most people. It's not that there's a magical component to not eating. Like whatever you eat at night before going to bed doesn't magically turn into fat. At the end of the day, it's all about energy balance. But there is something to be said for the fact that the things that most people consume after dinner usually tends to be junk food. I mean, it's not magic, but that's just like the reality, right? Like whatever you're able, and also a big reason why people become overweight is not even necessarily, I mean, the foods that they're eating do play a big role in that. NIH-funded research led by Kevin Hall and colleagues has shown that ultra-processed foods directly encourage their own overconsumption. But it's not just the foods, it's the habits that can facilitate overeating or not. And one of the big mechanisms underlying the tendency to overeat is when we're able to do it mindlessly. And when you think about what you tend to eat late at night, especially post dinner, I mean, the foods that you're eating, like whatever the quote unquote foods or food-like products you tend to eat while watching Love Island from the comfort of your couch, those foods tend to be junk foods, right? Like you're not eating pre-cooked strips of grilled chicken breast from Whole Foods, like while you're sitting on the couch watching Love Island, right? Like that's not what people are eating. They're eating ice cream. They're eating, I don't even know because I don't even have this stuff in my house. What do I have?
Chips.
Chips, true.
Yeah.
Like masa chips.
Okay, those are healthy chips, but yeah, but you can still overindulge in chips like that.
You could still, yeah, you can overindulge in anything. Well, the chips that I have, okay.
Because you like ice cream.
Right. But when I buy ice cream, I buy light ice cream. Right. Like I buy, so this is a wonderful, like, I think an important addition to this conversation. Like, again, it's not, there's no magical aspect of eating food late at night that causes it to turn to fat. But if you don't want to intermittent fast, which is fine, because again, there's nothing magical about it. Like, just try to be smart about what it is that you're eating. So now we have all these light ice creams. We've got Halo Top. We've got, there's another one. Oh man, I discovered there's a brand of ice cream called Nix. 250 calories for a pint of their vanilla ice cream. Sign me up. It's like, it's amazing. You could eat the whole, because that's the thing. It's like, nobody wants to like moderate their consumption of ice cream, right? Like, how fun is that? It's not fun. So, some of these lighter ice creams I think can be fine. And I do eat chips, but like, if you look in my cabinet right now, I've got Quest chips. You guys know I'm a big fan of Quest protein chips. And so I'll eat those like while watching TV. A bag of those. They're in these small bags, so they're already portion controlled. But I'm different. Not everybody is eating those most people are eating like Lay's chips or Doritos, or I don't even have these but those kinds of foods. You guys get the point. Beating a dead horse here. But yeah. So if intermittent fasting works for you in that way, and here's another way, way to use intermittent fasting to your benefit. Not that it's magic, but if you're trying to lose body fat, when in the day do you tend to be most hungry? When is it more likely for the wheels to come off and the train to run off its tracks, so to speak? It is at the end of the day, right? It's also when dinner tends to be our big social meal. So often, that's the meal that tends to be eaten out more frequently. It tends to be eaten socially. So intermittent fasting could also be used at the earlier part of the day where, if you know that you're more likely to go off the rails later in the day, well, then maybe not eating for the first couple of hours if you're not as hungry makes a lot of sense. Maybe not eating until 10, 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning makes a lot of sense because you're kind of skewing your food intake so that you're able to enjoy the bulk of your calories later in the day. And maybe for the first meal, you go a little bit lighter in fat. Maybe you go a little bit lighter in carbohydrates. Like for my first meal of the day, it's if I know that I've got like a work dinner or I'm eating out with friends later in the day and I have specific body composition goals. So most of the time this doesn't actually matter to me all that much because I prioritize protein. I have other guardrails in place, so I don't necessarily need to use the timing. And I don't necessarily need to take an intermittent fasting approach. But if I know that I'm eating with family later or friends and I'm going to be going out to a restaurant where I know, restaurant food tends to be like really oily, I'll make sure that I'm eating, I'm maybe pushing my first meal of the day a few hours into the day. And for that first meal, I'm eating a lower fat meal. I'm eating, egg whites with some lean protein scrambled in and reduced fat cheese. Not that full fat cheese is unhealthy, but I'm trying to, economize so that later in the day, if I'm going to have like Brazilian barbecue with my family and I want to pig out, well, I'm planning, right? I'm making use of my executive control aspect of my brain and executive function, and I'm planning and I'm utilizing impulse control, and my first meal in the day is going to be lower in fat so that I can save those fat calories for later in the day. So use intermittent fasting like a tool. There are no hard and fast rules. It is valuable to spread your protein intake out evenly over the course of the day and eating, making sure that first meal, whatever it happens to be, is high in protein. It can be a lean protein, but making sure that it's high in protein can be really beneficial when it comes to muscle protein synthesis for preserving muscle and optimizing for muscle growth. So that should be really helpful. But beyond that, it's not magic. And if it works for you, fantastic. And if it doesn't work for you, also all good. I won't be offended either way. All right. Moving along. This is a great question. Okay. Ari Driscoll asked, what, if anything, have you changed your mind on since writing Genius Foods? Wow, that's a great question. Well, a few things. I mean, I really, with Genius Foods, one of the reasons why it continues to be a successful book and why it continues ultimately to change lives, which is my, which was my goal for writing the book. When writing it, I specifically sought to make it a timeless book. I wanted the book to stand the test of time. And so as a result, I really leaned heavily on the hierarchy of evidence that existed at the time. And so the vast majority of the book, I would say, is still completely accurate and checks out and is going to be of vast utility. But as I mentioned in that book, much of what we knew about brain health and particularly the role of diet in brain health, it's very new science, very new, rapidly evolving. And so, there are some things that I would change, actually. And one of the things that I would change is I think that at the time there was more merit to the carbohydrate insulin model of obesity. And I think I've mentioned this on a previous AMA, so I don't want to be redundant. But essentially, there was the thinking that there was a unique aspect to carbohydrate intake and sugar intake that was particularly promotive of obesity, that was particularly diabetogenic, so promotive of insulin resistance. And the tide has really turned on that. And I would say that a big study to come out in the years post-publication for Genius Foods was the 2019 Kevin Hall ultra-processed food study that found that it's not the carbs or the fat in modern foods that is necessarily exclusively to blame when it comes to obesity. It's the processing. It is the hyper-palatable, hyper-calorie dense nature of ultra-processed foods that are the primary driver of obesity and overweight, which is the primary driver of insulin resistance. And that study really kind of opened my eyes, and that came out after Genius Foods had been published. Genius Foods came out in 2018. So I think there is probably a degree of caution in the book with regards to dietary carbohydrate intake specifically, that if I could rewrite or retract to some degree, I probably would, because I don't think that carbohydrates are I know that carbohydrates are not uniquely promotive of insulin resistance. They're not uniquely promotive of overweight. It's not the carbs. And it's not the fat, it really is the overconsumption of calories. It is an energy surplus chronically that drives overweight, that causes fat storage in your adipose tissue, subcutaneously, that is under the skin, but then ultimately, when sustained, causes fat gain in your viscera, your visceral adipose tissue or belly fat. It causes fat gain ultimately when those usual fat storage sites become overfilled. You'll start to accumulate fat in tissues where fat shouldn't be, like in your organs. This is known as ectopic fat. So you'll start to store fat in your liver, which causes inflammation and drives insulin resistance in the liver. You'll start to store fat in your pancreas. All it takes is a little bit of fat, about 1 gram of fat stored in your pancreas, to cause systemic insulin resistance. There was a study that found that all it took was 1 gram of fat lost from the pancreas to essentially restore insulin sensitivity. So it comes ultimately down to energy balance, and that's the aspect of Genius Foods that I would probably rewrite. But I don't think that takes away from the core message of the book, which was very prescient, I never know how to say that word, but it was very ahead of the curve when it came to warning against ultra-processed foods, which it also did. And so, yeah, there isn't much that I would change about the book. All of the 10 genius foods, I think, are all still amazing to prioritize in your diet. And so, yeah, it's a reason that I think that is a reason why the book continues to stand the test of time. And I'm very proud of it for that reason. So maybe fasting. I mean, like, as I've mentioned, I kind of changed my mind a little bit on the value of intermittent fasting. I think, circadian biology is certainly important, but we need a lot more research to know whether or not the benefits that we see from early time restricted feeding are a result of the timing of meal intake as opposed to just the fact that, it tends to be a very effective for some means of controlling calorie intake. So yeah, I think that, all up for debate. And as I've said again and again on this podcast, science reserves the right to change its mind. And my goal here on this show and with my work is always to be as honest as possible with you guys about what the science says, where the science delineates from my own sort of perspective on the science, because nutrition science is complicated. That's why everybody has an opinion about it. That's why there's so much infighting, even within the evidence-based nutrition community, about whether or not seed oils, for example, are good for you or bad for you, whether or not sugar is good for you or bad for you. You can find research. There's a saying, if you torture the research long enough, it'll confess to whatever you want. And that is true with many sciences, but it is certainly true for nutrition science, where there is so much gray. Nutrition science is just very hard to do. It's very complicated, and so that's why you're going to have a bajillion different opinions about it. And that's why it's very easy to make a case for any one of those opinions. So you just have to kind of, I think at a certain point, consult with your own intuition and your own common sense, and just do the best you can, All right, moving on. Kelly A. Scott 08 asks, does excess protein fuel cancer? Chris Wark says yes. Well, first off, I don't know who that is. And I don't care what any single person says about anything. You got to consult the literature. And even, experts on social media, I've seen say things that make it sound as though they are talking out of their beeholes. So, you got to, I think, take everything that you hear on social media with a grain of salt. Take everything that you hear on podcasts with a grain of salt. I mean, I think that we obviously try to be as rigorous as we possibly can over here without being long-winded and without making, endless caveats. We still want to keep things practical. But to answer the question, does excess protein fuel cancer? My opinion, my data-based perspective response to that question is no. The sources of the protein that you're ingesting does matter, though. There is a link between certain types of, I guess the general consumption of processed meats and certain types of cancer. Mechanistically, I think we need more research to say for sure what degree of processing, what types of processing, if any, are actually causally related to an increased risk of carcinogenesis, because, meat processing is a continuum. Like ground beef is a form of processed meat. And I think ground beef is fantastic. You process food when you make it at home. Like when you slice an apple, you're processing the apple to some degree. So we can't dogmatically be tethered to these labels like processed equals bad. I certainly eat plenty of meats that might be considered processed. I have a very lean Belinsky's chicken sausage in my fridge right now that I enjoy. Like it's lean, high protein, low in fat, low in calories, doesn't have added nitrates in it. So I think that some processed meats can be totally great, totally easy and convenient way to hit your protein target. But then others, if we're talking like ballpark hot dogs or the types of meat used in Subway sandwiches, like, do I think that that's good for you? No, I would never say that. But is it the meat itself that's driving the increased risk of cancer seen in people who consume it regularly, or is it the, what they're eating in the milieu of the diet and lifestyle of somebody who inevitably exists when a person routinely eats Subway sandwiches, or hot dogs from football, from baseball stadiums or whatever, fields, stadiums. These are all questions that need to be answered. But the protein itself, no, protein does not. I would not say that excess protein causes cancer. It's very hard to eat excess protein. What even is that? Because it's so satiating. We got to think about context. We got to think about dietary context. We got to think about the food matrix. We got to think about the degree of processing, the additives, and all that stuff. What else is in your diet? Are you eating ample fiber? Are you getting antioxidant phytonutrients? Are you eating primarily charred meat, or are you eating meat that's been more responsibly cooked? I mean, that's also something to think about. When you char meat, you're creating compounds on the surface of that meat that might in vitro show the potential to cause mutations that might lead to cancer. But, those are in vitro studies. Are you routinely eating that kind of meat? Are you eating that meat in the context of a diet that is low in fiber and deficient in antioxidant phytonutrients? Or are you eating occasional charred meat in the context of an antioxidant-rich diet that's fiber replete, and maybe you marinate your meat in. There have been studies to show that when meat is marinated in garlic and onions, antioxidant-rich herbs and spices, that the production of those compounds is actually attenuated. There's evidence to suggest that when we coat our meat prior to cooking with olive oil, which is I love extra virgin olive oil. It's a genius food. When we use extra virgin olive oil to cook meat, that it blunts the formation of some of these nasty compounds like heterocyclic amines and AGEs and whatnot. Extra virgin olive oil, because it's so rich in antioxidants. So context is really everything. I would not say, if somebody is blanket on social media saying excess protein causes cancer, I would unfollow that person, because it's just we need more nuance, and all that's doing is creating food fear. And protein, again, is an incredibly important nutrient. It's a very important tool. Protein is a biological necessity, but beyond that, it's a very useful tool to fighting off obesity and overweight today, because of just the context, the dietary, the food environment that we've inherited. So could you get by eating low protein like some do in less industrialized populations? Yeah, but they're eating lower protein diets in the context of a diet that's less processed. So they're eating more whole food sources of carbohydrates. Actually, the originators of the protein leverage hypothesis have talked about this, that, low protein isn't necessarily bad. It's just that low protein in the context of the standard American diet is bad, because what are the foods that are constantly at arm's reach that we will then consume to defend our protein intake? They're ultra-processed foods. In the context of a diet like in Okinawa, Japan, if we tend to eat low protein, well, we're not eating high protein, but the foods that we're going to be eating instead are high in water, fiber, very satiating sources of carbohydrates. So yeah, context is everything, and that's something that I hope you guys have, at least thus far, been able to glean from our work here together. All right, S. Faris 919. I'm a 73-year-old male in pretty good health, and my only income source is Social Security. I do take basic supplements and vitamins. Any suggestions for seniors? That's a fantastic question, and I'm very sensitive to that. I think you want to major in the majors, right? What are the majors when it comes to supplementation? Well, first of all, supplements should always be viewed as exactly that, supplements. They're typically not going to be necessary unless you have a specific dietary shortcoming or a nutrient inadequacy that we are specifically trying to treat. But generally, multivitamins for seniors, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that when it comes to the heavy hitters, protein is really, I think, great. A good quality protein supplement. There's data that I've come across recently that suggests that older adults tend to eat the bulk of their protein late in the day. Their last meal of the day tends to be their big protein meal. They tend to eat lower protein for breakfast. low protein for lunch. And I came across that data, and it perfectly aligns with what I know about how my dad eats. So my dad is in his 70s, and for breakfast he eats a banana. That's what my dad eats for breakfast. And then maybe he'll eat like a sausage or something, which in his head it's like that's all the protein that he requires for breakfast. But I know that what my dad is buying is not a high protein sausage. It is probably a fat loaded sausage with maybe 10 grams of protein. And, so he's eating a banana, he's eating a sausage. So that is not enough for older adults to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. If you're an older adult, 60 plus, you want to be getting 30 grams of protein for your first meal in the day. And if you just don't have the appetite to do that, which I know, appetite tends to be attenuated the older you get, I think a good quality protein shake in that context can be, you'd be getting a lot of bang for your buck. And protein supplements are cheap. Whey protein can be found on Amazon, super cheap way to boost protein. So have a protein shake first thing in the morning. I would say vitamin D for older adults, probably pretty important. Vitamin D is important for bone health. It's important for immune function. It's important for brain health. It's a hormone in the body that influences the expression of 5% of the human genome. I believe it's like something like 5,000 genes in the human genome are responsive to vitamin D status. I could have those numbers a bit skewed because it's been a bit since I've looked at that data. But vitamin D is a hormone, which is to say that we've got vitamin D receptors on tissues all throughout the body. And many older adults, spend a lot of their time indoors. So vitamin D can be very important. A good vitamin B12 supplement might also be useful. Many older adults are on proton pump inhibitors, acid blocking medications. I don't know why, but that does seem to be a thing. So we want to make sure that we're protecting our brains with B vitamins. Vitamin B12 is a great option there. And then creatine. I would say creatine, and this is, you don't need all of these. Like you just figure out what is going to make the most sense for you. Maybe you already eat a high protein breakfast. So then ignore that recommendation. But creatine, we're now gaining research on the impact of creatine on skeletal muscle, on brain health. And creatine, again, is very easy to find. It's very inexpensive. You can find cheap creatines. I would look for CreaPure creatine. But if I were a senior, I would probably still be supplementing with creatine. So consider that. What else is there? I mean, I love astaxanthin. That's something that I regularly take and probably will for life. Very powerful carotenoid antioxidant, important for brain and eye health. I should say beneficial for brain and eye health. Its importance relative to other nutrients, is, I guess we can debate that. I think it's very beneficial, and so I take it. And then, fish oil. But yeah, I would just kind of try to assess where you're at. Protein is a big lever. Frailty is a big issue when it comes to today's senior citizens, and I think optimizing protein intake and making sure that you're hitting your protein target consistently throughout the day is very important because anabolic resistance increases as we get older. So whereas for a younger person, 25 grams of protein might be sufficient to hit that leucine threshold and stimulate muscle protein synthesis, 30 grams of protein might be what it takes for a senior. So making sure that you're getting at least 30 grams of protein over the course of 4 or at every meal over the course of the day, very helpful. And a good quality protein shake is a great way to achieve that. So yeah, just to recap: protein, vitamin D, vitamin B12, especially if you're on some kind of acid blocking medication. And I think that's it. Again, not one size fits all. If you take a statin drug, I think it's really important to take CoQ10. Statins deplete your cells of CoQ10, which is really important it's an antioxidant. It's important for energy production. So you want to take that. But those are just some of the basics. I don't think you don't need anything exotic. Whatever you're seeing marketed today on social media, I would say avoid that. The big levers, protein, creatine, micronutrients like vitamin D, magnesium, all really important stuff. So yeah. And a good multivitamin is a great way to kind of check off some of those bases. Well, that's what we got. That's all she wrote. And I hope that was helpful for you guys. It is the end of 2025. And so I guess, while I'm here and I've got you, worth expressing a bit of gratitude for the fact that you guys continue to listen to our episodes week after week. We put a lot of heart and soul into this show. We have a very small team. It's myself. It's Sydney, who's here typing away off camera. And we just love doing this, putting this content out for you guys. And we genuinely feel like we're creating the best health and wellness content around. The best. I say that without irony. I just think that we try really hard to make it content that's approachable, that's not super long-winded, that doesn't feel like you're having to chew through an entire bowl of kale to get to the nugget of practical application. We try to keep things practical and achievable and science-based, but also we like to kind of, be a bit rebellious at times too, because there's a lot of, science can be captured, unfortunately. It's a great, perfect, you might even call it a perfect endeavor, but it's run by fallible humans. And so, I think it's important to maintain a critical lens. And so, the show keeps growing. We're very grateful. I wake up every day excited to do what I do, to create content for you guys. And I love the feedback that I get. So make sure that you're subscribed. Leave those ratings and reviews on your podcast app, on your the comments on YouTube. I always love to read. They're always very positive. And please continue spreading the word, because we've got really big things in store for 2026 and beyond. So stay tuned for that. Thank you again. Sending love. Hope that the new year brings you lots of health, prosperity, love, insight, and good vibes. So peace out. Sending love. And I'll catch you on the next episode. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.